Welcome to APUSH for 5, your shortcut to mastering the AP U.S. history exam. Let's jump into our midterm review, periods 1 through 4. If you can master these hard-level questions, you're well on your way to an A. Question 1. Stimulus. This stimulus covers questions 1 through 3. Benjamin Franklin's proposals relating to the education of youth in Pennsylvania, 1749, argued that education should cultivate reason, virtue, and civic responsibility to prepare citizens for participation in public life. Horace Mann's 12th Annual Report, 1847, promoted universal, moral, and practical education as essential for sustaining social order and democratic citizenship in a republic. Question. Both Franklin and Mann viewed education as primarily serving which broader purpose? A. The advancement of purely scientific inquiry divorced from moral influence. B. The cultivation of civic virtue and moral discipline as foundations of Republican society. C. The expansion of individual self-interest as a measure of progress. D. The replacement of religious instruction with purely utilitarian training. The correct answer is B. The cultivation of civic virtue and moral discipline as foundations of Republican society. From Franklin's Enlightenment vision of civic improvement to Mann's moralized common school, both defined education as a tool of Republican virtue and social stability, not just personal advancement. Question 2. Stimulus. See image. Question. Together, these works best illustrate which long-term evolution in American reform thought? A. The transformation of Enlightenment self-culture into institutional moral reform aimed at cultivating virtuous Republican citizens. B. The retreat from moral individualism towards state control of private virtue through compulsory schooling. C. The persistence of Puritan communal ethics unaltered by secular Enlightenment influence. D. The replacement of civic education with economic vocationalism as the basis of citizenship. The correct answer is A. The transformation of Enlightenment self-culture into institutional moral reform, aimed at cultivating virtuous Republican citizens. Mann extended Franklin's self-discipline ethic into a public framework. Education as moral infrastructure for democracy. Question 3. Stimulus. See image. Question. The contrast between Franklin's and Mann's approaches reveals what shift in the perceived relationship between individual and state in fostering virtue? A. From hierarchical dependence on elite instruction to egalitarian skepticism of education itself. B. From classical Republican restraint to romantic celebration of personal emotion and spontaneity. C. From private self-governance grounded in rational habit to public moral engineering through civic institutions. D. From economic self-interest to transcendentalist withdrawal from social duty. The correct answer is C. From private self-governance grounded in rational habit to public moral engineering through civic institutions. Mann transformed Franklin's internal moral code into a state-sponsored project. Virtue became a civic, not merely personal enterprise. Question 4. Stimulus covering questions 4 through 6. The Articles of Confederation, 1781, left the national government powerless to regulate interstate commerce, resulting in economic rivalry, inconsistent tariffs, and trade disputes among the states. In Gibbons v. Ogden, 1824, the Supreme Court under Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that the federal government had authority over interstate commerce, establishing national supremacy and economic regulation. Question. When examined across time, what broader continuity do these writings reveal about the moral foundation of American economic culture? A. The enduring belief that disciplined labor and moral self-control legitimize social mobility and justify inequality as meritocratic. B. The rise of collectivist moral economy rejecting profit as incompatible with virtue. C. The disintegration of Protestant work values in favor of laissez-faire amorality. D. The emergence of secular hedonism as the guiding ideal of Republican life. The correct answer is A. The enduring belief that disciplined labor and moral self-control legitimize social mobility and justify inequality as meritocratic. Both authors sacralize labor and discipline as civic virtues, embedding moral worth in economic behavior, continuity linking Republican virtue to capitalist success. Question 5. Stimulus. See image. Question. When viewed through the lens of the market revolution, Gibbons versus Ogden most clearly signaled what constitutional adaptation? A. A constitutional return to agrarian isolationism. B. A rejection of commercial expansion as incompatible with Republican virtue. C. The elevation of state monopolies as defenders of local enterprise. D. The judicial endorsement of an activist federal government promoting national infrastructure and economic growth. The correct answer is D. The judicial endorsement of an activist federal government promoting national infrastructure and economic growth. Marshall's ruling aligned constitutional interpretation with market revolution realities, legitimizing federal involvement in canals, roads, and interstate enterprise. Question 6. Stimulus. See image. Question. The contrast between these two sources reveals what evolution in American political thought? A. The return to mercantilist economics under the guise of judicial nationalism. B. The continuation of anti-federalist philosophy through judicial restraint and strict construction. C. A shift from revolutionary suspicion of concentrated power to a constitutional embrace of federal authority as a guarantor of liberty through economic integration. D. A rejection of Republican self-government in favor of executive-led economic planning. The correct answer is C. A shift from revolutionary suspicion of concentrated power to a constitutional embrace of federal authority as a guarantor of liberty through economic integration. The decision reflected a philosophical pivot from fear of government to faith in its coordinating power, federal strength reimagined as the safeguard of Republican independence. Question 7. Stimulus covering questions 7 through 9. See image. Question. The relationship between Paine's and Garrison's arguments best illustrates which ideological continuity in American reform traditions? A. The transition from secular Enlightenment rationalism to pragmatic compromise within antebellum politics. B. The adaptation of revolutionary moral absolutism to successive generations of reform that equated social injustice with political despotism. C. The growing belief that gradualism and moderation were the only legitimate routes to liberty. D. The decline of moral rhetoric in favor of legal positivism as the basis of reform. The correct answer is B. The adaptation of revolutionary moral absolutism to successive generations of reform that equated social injustice with political despotism. Garrison recast Paine's revolutionary language of tyranny into moral denunciation of slavery, showing how moral absolutism endured from political to social reform. Question 8. Stimulus. See image. Question. The contrast between Paine's and Garrison's appeals most clearly reveals what transformation in the perceived source of moral authority in American public life? A. From Enlightenment reason and natural rights to evangelical conscience, and divine moral law as engines of reform. B. From theocratic authority toward pragmatic secular politics detached from theology. C. From collective community virtue to isolated individual self-interest. D. From radical egalitarianism to acceptance of entrenched hierarchy as providential order. The correct answer is A. from Enlightenment reason and natural rights to evangelical conscience and divine moral law as engines of reform. Paine's secular rationalism grounded liberty in reason. Garrison rooted it in divine command, signaling the 19th century shift from political to moral absolutism. Question 9. Stimulus. Question. In comparing their rhetoric, what key change occurred in how dissent was justified in American reform movements? A. The substitution of personal piety for political activism. B. The redefinition of rebellion as treason subject to civil punishment rather than moral validation. C. The expansion of dissent from collective protest to elite legislative negotiation. D. The transformation of rebellion from a civic right of self-government into a sacred duty of conscience transcending law and political institutions. The correct answer is D. The transformation of rebellion from a civic right of self-government into a sacred duty of conscience, transcending law and political institutions. Garrison elevated Paine's civic defiance into moral transcendence, obedience to higher law over human law, marking dissent as divine obligation. Question 10. Stimulus, foreign policy and national identity. Washington, 1796, and Monroe, 1823. Question. How do these two documents together illustrate a transformation in American foreign policy ideology? A. From European dependency to global isolation and economic stagnation. B. From cautious neutrality to assertive hemispheric leadership under the guise of non-intervention. C. From monarchical alliance building to ideological pacifism. D. From defensive nationalism to aggressive imperial conquest. The correct answer is B. From cautious neutrality to assertive hemispheric leadership under the guise of non-intervention. Washington counseled neutrality to preserve the young republic. Monroe expanded that principle into hemispheric dominance. Together they mark the evolution of foreign policy from defensive isolationism to moralized regional authority. Thanks for watching A Push for 5. Let us know in the comments which questions you like the most. If today's practice helped you, tap like, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any future videos. And share this with a friend who's also aiming for that 5. If you want more hands-on learning or direct feedback, reach out directly. We'd love to help you take your prep to the next level. See you in the next video.